Something is happening behind closed doors that rarely makes the evening news. It is a sequence of moves, countermoves, and silent negotiations that suggests a shift in how the global order is being managed. For decades, the United States has positioned itself as the unshakable guarantor of global security. But right now, Washington is finding itself in a position where it may need to ask its greatest rival for help. This is the concept of linkage. It operates on the idea that conflicts on one continent can be used as leverage on another, allowing nations to trade cooperation in the Middle East for concessions elsewhere. To see how these threads are pulled, we have to look at the system of controlled tension that has defined the Middle East for years. It was a balance of proxy conflicts and sanctions that operated within specific, invisible red lines. That system appears to be breaking down. As it does, the ability to manage the region is shifting away from traditional military presence and toward the diplomatic influence held in Beijing. This shift is driven by a change in Israeli strategy. Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated that anyone who believes the fighting has concluded is mistaken. He is now outlining an operational phase where Israeli and American forces would physically enter Iran to remove enriched uranium. This satellite imagery shows the scale of the Iranian nuclear complex. These facilities are heavily fortified and isolated in desert terrain, making the physical retrieval of material an objective that requires a direct military confrontation. In response, Iran has moved the goalposts of its own doctrine. Their leadership has issued directives that surrender is not an option, and that any strike on Iranian assets will trigger a response that is no longer measured or proportional. Iranian military officials report that missiles and drones are already programmed and waiting for the order to fire. This positioning, visible here beneath the portraits of Iranian leadership, suggests they are prepared to respond the moment hostilities resume. These preparations have already had an effect on strategic deterrence. When two F-35 fighter jets, the cutting edge of Western air superiority, reportedly made emergency landings under circumstances linked to electronic interference, it introduced a new level of doubt among observers in Washington and Tel Aviv. With Israel's goal of physically removing uranium and Iran's promise of massive retaliation, both nations have established doctrines that leave little room for an easy exit. This conflict is physically constrained by a single waterway, the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, it is barely 21 miles wide. Through this 21-mile gap, roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day. Iran uses this geography as leverage, positioning fast attack vessels throughout the strait. These small, agile boats are designed to challenge naval movements and could disrupt the flow of commercial tankers on very short notice. If the strait is contested, the price of oil reacts immediately. This increases petrol costs in London, heating bills in Chicago, and manufacturing costs across Europe, reigniting inflation just as central banks were beginning to bring it under control. This pressure comes as the American military is already operating at a high tempo. Precision-guided missile stockpiles are being depleted by ongoing operations elsewhere, and naval assets are stretched across multiple theaters simultaneously. Sustaining a high-intensity conflict in the Persian Gulf while maintaining deterrence in the Indo-Pacific presents a logistical challenge that planners in Washington, Beijing, and Tehran are all currently calculating. Diplomacy is currently stalled on a single requirement. Iran is seeking a durable, enforceable guarantee that the United States will not attack it again. Everything else, the nuclear inspections and economic concessions, is secondary to this security demand. Providing that guarantee is a struggle for Washington. The unpredictable shifts in American foreign policy make it difficult for any administration to provide a security assurance that Iran or its allies will take as settled. This leaves China as the only country with enough influence to provide a guarantee that all sides might take seriously. Beijing has watched as its diplomatic position has strengthened, knowing that Iranian cooperation may not happen without Chinese pressure. By needing China to broker a resolution to the Iran crisis, the United States is operating in a reversal of the dynamic that has characterized their relations for decades. Historical patterns suggest that Beijing does not provide this level of diplomatic assistance for free. Every act of strategic cooperation carries an expectation of a reciprocal benefit. Analysts are looking at Taiwan as the likely focal point for these concessions. This could involve a gradual reduction in arms sales, or a signal that American military commitment in the Pacific is no longer as ironclad as previously stated. Taiwan is the world's primary manufacturer of advanced semiconductors. These chips power every modern smartphone, computer, and weapon system, making the stability of its industry essential to the global economy. If China uses its leverage over the Iran situation to extract concessions here, it would mean a softening of the diplomatic language and security architecture that has defined the region for 70 years. The resolution or escalation of this Middle Eastern standoff now has direct implications for the global balance of power. The outcome will likely decide the rules of the international system and whether it remains organized around American or Chinese